As you're building out your digital customer success journey within your MSP, one of the important elements to be working on is the QBR package and what to include. In this week update, I want to spend a few moments with you to discuss what goes in that package and how, depending on what you add, will elevate your presence within that organization, ultimately create more stickiness and more revenue in the long term for your organization. Let's go ahead and take a closer look. You know, there is an old saying, never to judge a book by its cover. I think for this instance, preparing a QBR package needs to be presented professionally. So we can probably throw that saying out, never to judge a book by its cover, because we want to put a little more emphasis on the design, the creativity that goes with it, and show that you fully understand potentially the customer feeling and domain in which they operate in. So in my example, I'm doing this for an engineering firm. Took the time designing a well presented cover page. There's so many stock items out there, so there should never be a barrier in you coming up with something that is going to be representing of your clients. I would say give this some additional thought in terms of, including, who you're presenting this thing for, who in terms of the client you're preparing the package for. And of course, include some basic information about maybe the team presenting and delivering this information during the QBR. One of the areas that I found typically overlooked is the president's message or the CEO's message to the client. There is never going to be a scenario whereby every single QBR meeting, the president of the MSP will need to be there, unless it's a massive client and potentially that's part of the agreement. But chances are it's a TAM, it's an account manager, maybe there's some members on the technical staff going out and doing this presentation. So it's important to capture a message from the senior leadership of the organization and ensure that is being delivered as part of the message during that QBR. In my case, because this is a package, and ensure that it's written in a way that is well formatted and is actually speak to the client where they are in their journey. But of course, we are the MSP itself. It's within its own journey, thanking the clients for the business, the long years of service, showcase them from the point of view, what is changing in the technology landscape. And of course, items potentially they can actually look forward to. Almost like laying out a basic, insight as to what can a client expect as they're flipping through the pages ahead. So take a moment, think of this almost like a table of content where you can include items like the service plan. You're going to be doing things like the assessment review. Potentially, you're going to be providing a series of report. Whatever else that's going to be crucial within that package for you to deliver, take a moment and at least have a short bulleted list. So again, somebody who might be flipping through that booklet at a glance, they can know what to expect in the pages ahead. This is your opportunity to have everyone within the MSP organization elevate. The team that is typically going and supporting this client and presenting, uh, add faces to these individuals, right? Not every meeting, potentially none of those meetings, some of these individuals will be able to make it to. But it's important for the client to see who these folks are that is actually supporting them, delivering service, working on their tickets, working on projects, whatever it is. It's always a good idea to actually at least elevate your team. This is part of great branding and it's something that you can actually ultimately, just put a little page within that QBR as to who those folks might be. Moving on is, of course, the various sort of tiers of service that you're delivering as an MSP, your good, better, best package, right? So it may be you're starting a client out on the essential package here, and in time you want to move them into enhanced and then ultimately that enterprise package. It's a perfect opportunity for that client of yours to know what else is, available maybe in some of those advanced packets. So you can plant the correct seeds, you can actually build a business case over time. If we move you into some of these packages, potentially you're going to get more value from the services we're delivering. Next, have a meeting agenda. There are so many meetings I have seen MSPs have when it comes to business review, and it gets derailed by, competing interests by a certain individual that might be in that room. And, people are doing it by basically the seat of their pants. We want to be able to actually make sure that there's a structured approach in how you're presenting your meetings. Have clear objectives, right? Have a, strategic alignment. Let the client know what they're going to be expecting in the next 60 minutes or the next 90 minutes. Again, there's a lot of valuable time being actually put in preparing for this meeting. So when it comes time to deliver it, we want to make sure that everyone is succinct and making sure that there is clear expectation what's going to happen in the meeting. And of course, any sort of future follow-up action that needs to be done once that meeting is actually over. As an MSP, this is an area in which you can actually elevate your understanding of the client's industry, changes that is happening, and of course, how your practice is aligning to meet that client where those changes might be happening. A lot of these might be things like very, very strategic. There might be imperatives for these business to actually continue being competitive within the marketplace. You have an opportunity here to showcase that you are supporting other like businesses. In my example, this is an engineering firm. We are supporting other businesses out there in the market with similar project. This is an area again for you to plant additional seeds that hopefully will actually turn into major initiatives overall, help again expand many of the contracts potentially you already have with the client. Uh, a little important tid note on this, right? You'll notice this document was prepared by myself. For the preparing team at the MSP, this is a chance for you to elevate yourself again, right? Again, there's many of you, they are supporting this client, but there might be a few of you from the account management's point of view, the TAM, that ultimately is putting in a lot of work. Let the client know that you are their representative. You are there to actually help to ensure the quality of service being promised in that MSA is being delivered and, of course, far exceeding that as well. Moving on to things like active projects and roadmaps. Don't make this a 5-year plan. There is clients that need 5 years of planning. Take some time and understand your client if they have this sort of capacity to do that. I can tell you most businesses I have worked with cannot think beyond 18 months. This landscape that we are in at the moment is changing so fast, and sometimes it makes sense to be delivering projects in bite size versus long strategic projects that might be happening over multiple years or multiple quarters. If we can actually try to condense those things and have deliverables every single quarter, I think you're going to find success. I think you're going to find velocity in that approach as well. The other thing to keep in mind as you're doing this work, take a moment to capture the client's business goal. What is it, maybe in the next 18 months, this client of ours want to achieve? Is that digital transformation? Is that making sure the remote employees that they have continue having a better or great experience, working outside of the office and having access to all the technology and resources potentially they need to do their work. This client, again, example here is focusing on working with the federal government, so they need to become CMMC certified. So they want to apply for larger contracts. So there's certain, again, initiatives that needs to be put in place so ensure that, they're able to actually do that. So in capturing those business goals, you want to distill that on your roadmap so the client can easily see which one of these recommendations are tied to those goals. And of course, a party of those items, which one of them going to be super critical, which one of them maybe not so much critical. But again, over time now, we can actually plot these things and showcase progress is in fact being made. Goes along with this is a budget and forecast. And the way I usually like to discuss budget and forecast is almost in a P&L format. Clients get it. I would say make this a little more enticing than a basic P&L. It should be visually appealing. It should communicate the various data points that you have in mind. Anything that might be recurrent, include labels showcasing that. Anything might be fixed fees and so forth. And again, you have the opportunity to tie those business goals to these items so they can clearly connect the dots here as to which one of these projects or changes within the environment that needs to be made are tying back to those business goals. Again, you have a higher chance of getting some of these items maybe moving up in a project line than potentially getting, further delay down the line. Moving into things like risk and action items, every meetings will have, outstanding items. There might be potential actions on projects and compliance, maybe other sort of miscellaneous activities. This is where taking copious notes is super important to capture, what is the issue, who is raising the issue, the owner of that issue, have we closed off on it, or is this thing on hold? We are waiting on maybe potential materials and so forth to get shipped to actually work on that issue. But that's the thought process here, is to be able to capture those things and work through some of these items with your clients. Again, I'm now going to suggest having entire meetings on issues unless maybe we are meeting a little more frequently. But the whole idea here is to capture this to showcase you're in fact listening and you're following through on the action that is actually required. The service metrics report is one of my favorites one within this package because it shows, what the client expectation is, maybe some of the outcomes of that MSA that is signed. You are in fact, delivering above and beyond that, right? Being able to showcase, we are doing a fantastic job squashing all of those tickets your team's submitting, being able to showcase a bit of a theme or trend overall, what is going on with some of the issues coming in. And then we can get into things like KPIs, on these tickets. Are we seeing an influx in tickets? Maybe the client is going to be, getting a new office or they're hiring more employees and so on. Guess what? There is going to be more tickets potentially coming in because of those additional employees, entering those offices. So you're going to want to plan for this accordingly. Being able to speak about how your team is doing against those tickets, how much time it takes you usually to solve a ticket, your average response time. Again, the MSA might be saying a lot of these items, and it's important your team is able to substantiate in a report like this. Hey, we are able to actually, meet your expectation above and beyond. I mean, that might be the sort of gold standard we set in place, but we are able to actually operate a little more higher than that. Say include things like ticket load if you can. It's always, great data points that potentially you can have a conversation with these businesses owners about. Then we're going to move into the CSAT bit, right? We want to showcase that the interaction that we are having with the employees are in fact, amazing interaction overall. They are seeing value from working with our team, capturing some of those, feedback and including it here goes a long way. And even, feedback on some of the technicians, who is, being rated amazingly, right? There might be a few preferred technicians for these clients. We want to be able to have a moment to recognize our team within that QBR as well. It's not often these unsung heroes get recognized, and anytime we can actually do that, we want to actually, again, let the client know they are very fortunate to be working with such a rewarding team that we have here. If there are systems out there that, causing issues, open tickets, reopen tickets, whatever not, you might need to surface here. This might be a good way, but there is potentially multiple places within that sort of QBR you may want to actually raise items as it relates to tickets because again, there might be particular areas where those tickets are tied to, and I think you're going to see that here as well. The other item I will typically need to focus in on is the security and compliance, right? What is going on with the organization? Are they still receiving a lot of questionnaire? Are those questionnaires falling on, our team's shoulder to fill out? Those insurance questionnaire and vendors questionnaire and so on. Oftentimes they are, and it might behoove us to actually come up with a solution so we minimize the number of questionnaires we're actually solving, what's going on with website security, email security, and so forth, even down to things like brand reputation, how the client is doing what generally we are seeing from the industry's trends point of view. And if they're scoring more than the industry average or below in some cases, we're going to want to point those things out and, action accordingly. Now, I mentioned earlier this client is an engineering firm. They are dealing with the federal government and some contracts. So guess what? They need to comply with CMMC. So this MSP happens to be helping this organization with compliance. So perfect way for us to actually showcase how we are doing in the general assessment. What is the Spurs score looking like? How are we doing in terms of completing policies and procedures and so on? And then we can actually get into things like risk and vulnerabilities, even down to third-party risk with vendors, and even potentially we still have some poems open in other frameworks that's going to be translated into things like action item, where we want to be able to actually give a synopsis of what is happening here from a compliance point of view. Then we're going to get into things like, backups. And the backups, is the lifeblood in terms of last line of defense, right? Something goes wrong, we better have good backups to be able to recover this client, right? Again, think about engineering, things about CAD work, the hundreds of hours potentially going into some of these designs. We want to make sure we are paramount in protecting those systems. We are showing that we are actively replicating that data. We are verifying it and our success in doing that. Even down to things like storage. Again, you have the ability to position certain data point in which you potentially need further buy-in. Hey, you're running out of storage. We have maybe 20% left on the SAN array. It is time for us to actually secure some additional storage disk so we can actually increase the capacity, I should say, of that unit. And then we can actually get into things again, what is going on with our servers as it relates to tickets and so on. Are we notice there is systems failing out there, other sort of line of service like Microsoft 365 backups, or you're actually dealing with mailboxes and SharePoint sites, or think about things like NAS units and so on. Are those things being protected? How much retentions are we maintaining? And get this sort of confirmation from the client. Are we still in line based on what was discussed? Do we need to increase the retention? That's really the intent here. We're simply trying to set the right expectation and align on that way nobody is surprised when a request all of a sudden comes and say, hey, we need that sort of building drawing from 5 years ago, and realizing, oh, the retention was only set for 3 years. That's a problem overall. Moving on is going to be things like the assessment. I will say for every one of the QBRs you're having, you want at least a minimum to update the assessment if you have previously done it, right? So this client right now is 81% aligned to all the things we need them to do. And we're going to benchmark them across their hardware, security, continuity, strategic items, and so forth. Uh, a paramount way to actually show value is to qualitatively and quantitatively answer the question what you have done for the client, and maybe in the last 6 months or the last year. Depends on how frequently you're having some of these meetings. But the goal here is to show progress, right? Or even the opposite of that, show where there is no progress. And maybe that might be enough of impetus for the client to actually make the investments you've been asking of them for, so many months. But we ultimately want to showcase what's been happening over 2 points in time, and again, show the value our team overall is having in meeting some of these goals and improving the environment. Some of these might be cost related. You may need to actually raise it as a recommendation in a roadmap. Others might simply be configuration changes the team needs to make, and it's part of the MSA that we have in place. No big surprise. Almost every QBR will actually have an asset report. I will say, include some of the basics that is required here. Things like, warranty information, when something was purchased, when the warranty expires, the age of the machine. Does it have some of the other basic items in place, like an AV or EDR? Does it have encrypted hard drives? Is the system patched? Does it even have a supported operating system? All of this can be tied right back into the roadmap. But again, keep in mind, these additional reports that you're typically going to want to include in the QBR are supplemented data to help, I'll call it justify why you're asking of something, or to provide the client with further insight as to why something is needed, and things for them to keep in mind. Maybe there's a wide array of their systems is coming to end of life, and they seriously need to get on in terms of budgeting for the replacement of those machines. Taking this down further, right? We have employee unlicensed report, and this is a good way to show that you understand who are the employees within the organization, the sort of location they might be, the license that they might have associated with their name, and really what's happening for things like security awareness training. Are folks not completing that? Do we have some usual suspects now that the ones that keep clicking on things that potentially we might need to do some sort of custom training with, even down to things like dark web scanning to see, hey, is there some leakage of credentials happening? Is folks utilizing their business email to sign up for personal accounts, and maybe it's a not reputable organization that an account is being used, and there's a breach now and a dump of that data on the dark web. We need to monitor for that because guess what? And users will be end users. That same account and password they use internally is now being used on external properties as well. And an additional area to focus on is, of course, those third-party agreements, and your clients will always be having a slew of these things. Now, think of things like, an ISP fee or a hosting fee, potentially might be a copy service fee. All of these additional services they might have, it's always a great idea to know what those things are, because potentially as you're gathering these data points, you now might want to actually begin offering these services. It might be something we need to partner with an external vendor that does VoIP because guess what? Maybe across our client base, we can begin helping about 25-30% of our clients. That means, again, we're able to grow that managed service agreement, doing a little more for the client. Again, the whole goal here is to create stickiness. The more we are doing for them, the harder for us to be displaced, and we are seen as a bit more value within the organization. Now, I would say apart from that, there might be potentially more information you want to include, and I'll leave that to you, right? These are simply some suggestion at this point, what you might want to include in this booklet. Again, the goal here is to make this thing polished, is representing your organization, the employees there. This is not something it's a high school project. I really want to emphasize that there's some of the QBR packages I have seen out there. There is one that is really well done. There's a lot of thoughts being put into these things, and there's one simply need a bit more work. I'm not suggesting you do this for all your clients, but definitely if you're going to segment your clients, maybe in an A, B, C, and D, the A and potentially some of the B clients, you definitely want to do this for. Well, we're going to leave it there, folks. I hopefully this week's uh, tech tip update was valuable for you as you're running your MSP practice. Hopefully you get some insights from some of these reports on potential data points you want to include in your next QBR. And I look forward to chatting with you soon. Take care.